Hello, media critique chic followers. This is Borderline Latina, and I am taking over. And as I like to do, I like to talk about social issues from a comedy freak perspective. And it is unscripted, yet informed by research, theories, observations, so on and so forth. You get it. Now let's get right into it. This episode, asking all them questions, allies version. White people. Oh yes, white people, you kind, meaningly responsible, socially responsible white folks that really want to get into the work and be allies for people of color. You know, them white folks, I have there's a special place in my heart for those white people, because they really do have good intentions and they really do want to work hard to change. They've probably gotten to the point where they've not only seen the racial injustices in this world, but they want to do something about it. They want to educate themselves and they want to better themselves in the world. That's a great thing. That's a great thing in itself. But I also think that it is important to continue to have the conversations on how to be effective allies, which is why I am taking over this episode. I want to talk about one particular facet of being an ally and a common mistake that I see a lot of well-intentioned allies doing. And that is asking questions. Specifically, asking people of color questions and questions and questions about how they can help the cause out and what they should know and how they should do better. And let's talk about why that strategy is problematic. Now, there's a kernel of truth and something right about that sentiment, very deep, which is the idea of, yes, I as a white person need to know more. I mean, not I as a white person, but a white person needs to know more and needs to learn more. Absolutely. That kernel of truth is truth. However, I think that white folks should really evaluate their gut instinct to ask people of color to help them. And I'll explain this by using an analogy that I can think is kind of close to this. Have you ever ordered food from a restaurant or was looking for a restaurant to go to? Maybe you're new in town or new in this place, you just moved here, you're visiting somewhere and you want to know the best spot to eat X food. What do you typically do? In this day and age, in these modern times, usually you would look up things on the interwebs. We do it all the time. We look up fastest, Chinese food near me or something like that. And you look through all the choices and you even look through the Yelp reviews and you do extensive work. I have seen and heard of people do extensive research in finding the best food to satisfy whatever craving that they have. And you notice that there are a lot of options and you evaluate the options by the reviews and so on and so forth. I'll give you another example. Have you ever been in a situation where you hear somebody speaking, maybe it's a lecture or you're just in a conversation with somebody or a group chat or whatever, and someone uses a word you have no idea what the hell that is about? Like literally no idea. What do? You sneakily look that thing up on your phone, right? You look it up to inform yourself and you try to pretend that you knew exactly what you're saying, or maybe add something later on to the conversation, make it seem that you understood and, really absorbed the information. those are some examples that highlight how often and how pervasive searching things on the internet is. And I'm not trying to be facetious, if I'm using the word correctly, but I find it very interesting that for many other things in our lives, it is very easy for people to just go on the internet and look it up. They don't typically ask people, I mean, some do, but usually it is a lot easier and faster and more convenient for the person to look it up. And with technology at our fingertips, a lot of people having internet on their phones or access to tablets and laptops and etc., it's very easy to get that information. Which is why I find it funny and interesting that for some reason when it comes to race, we don't do the same thing. White folks don't do the same thing. Why is it that they tend to look up other things, but not when it comes to race? And I could probably think that maybe people think, well, I have the person in front of me, I should ask them for it, as opposed to look it up on the internet. Maybe they think the internet won't give them as good or truthful information as a person. And that part I like to challenge because the internet is a great thing and there are many sources that have been peer-reviewed, right, and tested for accuracy. The information is out there and it is written by people of color, very similar ideas and issues and experiences with the people that are in your life. So there's accurate information out there and it's relatively easy to get access to that information. So why ask? I would think that it has to do with convenience. But I also think that convenience is not just that it's fast to ask the person because you can look it up on your phone just as fast, but convenient in the way of this privilege, or I should say, because privilege is a hot word for a lot of people, not privilege as in necessarily that you think you're better than, but the expectation that you can just ask someone information and that they should give it to you. I think at the heart of it, it is something that is overlooked among white people, but I can see in theory and research and just observation that sometimes white people act in ways that make it seem that they're entitled to whatever they get them, for example. So sometimes they might walk up, or buy something at a store or expect some sort of level of service or expect that if they ask a question that they are entitled to that answer. And that in itself isn't true. Sometimes you can ask a person a question or something like that, the person doesn't necessarily have to give you the answer. And another layer onto it, which makes it, if you add all those layers together because they're intersecting and it's not just 1 + 1 + 1, but overlapping, asking people of color to do work for you is part of the reason that racism exists today. The white supremacy, the idea that people of color have to do your work for you. Literally, there was an institution, rhymes with schmavery, that does that. Well, obviously, I'm not saying that people are making this direct connection. I believe, especially the well-meaning allies, are not making that direct connection. But I think it's so ingrained in people's behaviors, like a learned behavior, that here's a person that's in front of me, I can ask them that thing and I'm entitled to that information. I deserve that information. That information should be given to me. And that's not true. And you're putting the burden on people of color to continue to do that work, which is expected of us, which is to educate you and to do that work for you. That's more than we can handle. So I would say one of the biggest things you can do if you have questions is to look that thing up yourself. Once again, not being facetious about it, not trying to be sassy about it in a way of like, duh, do your work, do your chores or something like that. But just the idea that you're taking off something on someone else's plate that shouldn't be there in the first place. And I think that is a great place to start and continue. Not just assuming that the person next to you is just going to be your library of information. If you have an interest in learning in Mexican culture, to actually look up those sources online and articles and all these other things, artifacts, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to thinking that that person in your life who is of Mexican descent is the library for you. They're not. They don't have to tell you. Now it's a totally different thing if that person of color is giving you that information. They want to share that information for you. Obviously, it's their own will to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think you expecting that person or whoever in your life that you're being an ally for is supposed to also educate you in a process, that also puts another burden or task on them that they shouldn't have in the first place. Not to mention it requires them to revisit a lot of uncomfortable, trauma-filled, racialized trauma and stress and things that they don't need to. They're reliving all that stuff by educating you and having to start way in the beginning because y'all have not lived that thing, right? So, just food for thought. When it comes to asking all those questions, it may be great to have all these questions. Maybe have some really great questions. But make sure to use all your resources and to continue learning. That could be just one of the many steps heading towards the right direction. It might be a good thing to consider. Well, I think that's enough for today. This has been Borderline Latina Takes Over. Until next time.